Today, I'm going to start doing a new series of videos that I hope to do in the future called Color Q&A. The basic idea is oftentimes beneath the videos that I release, you're asking really good questions that are sometimes hard to answer in like 1 or 2 sentences in the YouTube comment page. So my hope is that I'll be able to highlight a comment and talk about it in a little more detail and hopefully give us a little more clarification around the question that was being asked. So let's start. The question for today was left by Mustafa Kamal 8606, and you asked, do you use curve for creating tonal contrast? And then do tonal contrast go to the timeline or the clip adjustment? And then in a second comment was mentioned, I always struggle how to correct contrast in clip with tonal curve look in mind. Are there general rules of thumb about how to correct or shot match contrast, like a specific IRE range? So let's talk about this in a bit more detail. First, it's helpful if we have a shared definition of what tonal contrast means. And here's the way I like to think of it. When we're adding contrast, we're often modifying the relationship of the highlights or the shadows to the rest of the image. And usually we talk about this in terms of roll-off. So how aggressive that roll-off is, what are we kind of doing to the top and the low end of the image? Those sort of creative adjustments, or as I like to call it, the creative curve of our piece, that's what I like to think of as tonal contrast. So just as an example here in Resolve, if we were to add a linear contrast, right? If you look at the waveform down here, we're keeping the relationship between all the different elements in the frame the same. We're not really modifying it. But if we were to start adding a curve, so one example we could do is look at what would this be like as an S-curve. So I'm just jumping into my project settings and saying use S-curve for contrast there. We can see we're no longer treating every part of the image the same or keeping the relationship the same. We're now modifying. We're rolling off the highlights more and rolling off the shadows. For my work, I prefer not to keep that box checked. If you want to think a little deeper about some of these different types of contrast, I actually produced a video called The 2 Types of Contrast. But to answer the first part of that question of do I use the curves tool for creating tonal contrast, the answer is I wish I used it more, but I just find it to be a really frustrating tool to work with when trying to set kind of the more global creative look. There's a bunch of different plugins and DCTLs out there that all kind of do it in slightly different ways, but I would encourage you, when you're kind of thinking about building your tonal contrast, so far I've been most happy with finding different plugin solutions rather than using the curves tool. But if I were to kind of demonstrate a philosophy for building the creative contrast look, what I would do is I would start making sure that we're pivoting at the mid-grade point of whatever working space we're in. So in this case, it's Davinci Intermediate. By the way, one of the ways you know what that pivot point is if you look up the white paper of the working space you're in. So I'm looking at the Davinci Wide Gamut white paper. Just about everyone will have listed out what the 18% gray point is. Many of them will also show you where that's mapped between 0 and 1, so between the black and the white. And so here we see it's 336. So that's how we get to this 0.336 for our pivot point. By the way, I'll put the link of the YouTube video and this white paper on the resource page. So feel free to check that after this video. Usually what I'll do is I'll start by trying to figure out what do I want my overall contrast to be. So I'll first try to figure out the ratio. And actually, let me jump over to this image here. I just need to make sure I have my color management set up. So usually when I'm thinking of my creative contrast, I'll set the pivot point to the right place. I'll start generating, what seems to be my contrast level. I'm gonna give us a little extra contrast than normal. And then I'll start thinking about what do I want the roll-offs to look like. As I mentioned, different DCTLs do this in different ways, but I'll start kind of finessing. Do I want kind of a raised black point there? What do I want the highlights to look like? Maybe I want a more milky highlight roll-off here. Something along that. So we're rolling off the black point and we're creating some milky highlights here. The next part of the question was, are we going to do this at the global timeline level or on a clip level? And there's different philosophies around this, but what I'll tell you is I personally don't want my creative contrast changing on a clip-to-clip basis. So I will take my creative contrast and leave it at the timeline level. I suppose you could do it on the individual clip level, but if you want a really quick way of making your image look inconsistent, start trying to mess with tonal contrast on a clip-to-clip basis. It's going to create a lot of headaches for you. So let's say that you built your overall creative contrast curve for, maybe this is kind of a hero shot, but as you go through the timeline, you come across another one, and you're like, I really want to back off the contrast. Well, don't mess with your highlight roll-off or your shadow roll-off right away. Start by just seeing, is there some, oh, that didn't work right. Is there just a way for me to linearly reduce some of the contrast in the scene just to get a little more detail there? So here's kind of the before, here's the after, because this will help me create a consistent look across the whole film. Well, if you like this video and you want to see more of these kind of color Q&As happen in the future, make sure to hit the like button and let me know down in the comments. Also, if you don't want to miss any future videos, hit the subscribe button and the notification bell, and you'll make sure to get those. All right, I'll see you in the next one.